Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Arnold, and I'm very privileged to have been working with Resource for 30 years. And I'm delighted to welcome you all here this evening to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Resource. Before I hand you over to Philip, who is our host for this evening, I just want to say a few welcomes to a number of people. First of all of our advisors and volunteers. In the last 30 years, I think we've had something over 200 volunteers. They do the most incredible job. They act as advisors to our clients, IT trainers, HR consultants, PR consultants, isometric testers. And in the 30 years that I've been working with Resource, I've continually been in awe of the work that our volunteers do. They're the heart of Resource, and they're the reason that we are so successful in getting our clients into employment. I'd like to thank also and welcome our funders, the donors who over the years have been very generous. I won't mention any names because I know that some of you like to remain anonymous, but I can assure you that without your very generous donations, Resource simply couldn't exist. Our trustees, welcome, ably led by Mike Beryl. They give us guidance, they give us good governance, and we're absolutely grateful to everything that they do. Our staff, we have a very small section of paid part-time employees. They also do an incredible job. They ensure that our clients get the right path through everything that Resource offers. They ensure that they meet the right advisor at the right time. They attend the seminars that are relevant to their needs. And they do the most incredible job. And they are led absolutely brilliantly by our CEO, Victoria Sturman. I'm also very pleased that tonight our three other members of our advisory council are here, Alan Sanders, Tricia Ward, Julian Gleicher. Over the years, they have all done tremendous work for Resource. We are very grateful to your dedication and hope that we can work together for many more years to come. And now I'm going to hand over to Philip Rosenthal. Philip is a partner in a search firm called Founders Keepers. He's also been involved prior to that with search companies, including 6 years at Google. Philip, we're extremely grateful for everything that you've done to help us to put this evening together. Over to you.
Thank you, David. Just a slight point of information, I'm Stephen. Philip couldn't make it, but I'm his brother, Stephen Rosenthal. But don't worry. But no, thank you so much for that introduction and for having me. And it's a genuine honor to be a part of this. And Resource is one of those amazing organizations that gets so much done quietly, but so impactfully. And just to hear the numbers and 30 years and 15,000 people into work is an amazing, amazing achievement and contribution that goes far beyond the individuals who have the jobs that probably change their lives and their families' lives. So amazing work, and no doubt brought about by your support. I'm going to introduce the panel to you in a minute, but before so, a bit of housekeeping on how we're going to run this. We've got 4 main areas we're going to talk about, which I'll explain as we go through. I'm going to go down the line and ask all the panelists, who are really an esteemed panel, to give their views. We've got some questions from the audience that have already been pre-prepared, but as with any question time session, if you've got a question, a burning desire, there are 2 microphone attendees walking in, they'll be down there. They can come to you, so please raise your hand. I'll try not to embarrass myself by doing the Dimbleby thing and just describing you by your dress. And we can go from there. If you need to leave for any reason, for a comfort break or to take a vacant role in the government, just try and do so try and do so as quickly and quietly as you can, but we're all here for a good time. So just, and we're going to be finished in an hour, so let's see if we can do that. And we'll have a few other guest speakers interspersed in between to give a few thoughts on this amazing organisation. So starting at the end of the panel and working this way, Alex Goat. Alex is the CEO of Livity, a self-described youth-led creative network whose purpose is to create a more positive life for young people by partnering with marketing, talent, and policy clients. Livity's goal is to make youth culture that creates change, helping companies to understand what their future customers demand, and empowering youth to play a major role in building their futures. Moving down, Alex, just to keep you on your toes, this is Alex Stephanie, who's the founder and CEO of Beam, which is a new social enterprise working in the homelessness sector. It's an amazing organisation, by the way. If you don't know it, you should check it out. Prior to this, Alex founded and led Just Park, the parking app he scaled from a team of 2 to 40 people, a multi-million-pound revenue-generating business. Alex is the author of The Business of Sharing, a critically acclaimed business book on the sharing economy, and is an advisor to the Seoul Metropolitan Government on the sharing and collaborative economy. Tony Danker is, since 2020, he's been the Director General of the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, which is the body representing 190,000 British businesses, employing close to 7 million people. Tony was previously the first CEO of Be The Business, a business-led movement created to transform the UK's productivity. He was the Chief Strategy Officer of the Guardian News and Media Group and a policy advisor to the Cabinet Office and Treasury. And finally, Luciana Berger is now the head of European Corporate Affairs for GoPuff, the grocery fulfillment scale-up business. Luciana spent close to a decade as a Labour Member of Parliament for Liverpool Wavertree, with the shadow ministerial briefs for public health, mental health, energy and climate change. Luciana, as we all know and empathise with immensely, left frontline politics in 2019, falling victim to awful anti-Semitic abuse, and is a vocal campaigner for the abolishment of anti-Semitism. And prior to being an MP, Luciana led Labour Friends of Israel, amongst other incredibly stellar career moves and jobs. So please welcome our panel. So we have an hour to discuss all things employment, and I think all of us are involved either professionally or in a lay capacity with work, but all of us actually go to work. And if we're going to spend 80%, as I say to my clients, if we're going to spend 80% of our lives doing this, we should enjoy it and get something out of it. So there's lots to talk about. The thing that I get asked by every potential client, I get asked to talk about diversity. What's your policy on diversity? And I think it's a welcome change in the narrative. But diversity means many different things. So the first open question I'm going to ask the panel, I'm going to start at this end, Luciana. How do we create a truly diverse workforce? And what does it mean in 2022 Britain to be diverse, and how do we achieve it?
Well, thank you, and fantastic to be here. What a wonderful event, and great to support Resource, which I know has done so much fantastic work, and lovely to see everyone. Where to begin? I mean, I think if I perhaps reframe the question, why does it matter and why is it important? Diversity matters for lots of different reasons, but for 3 key reasons. In terms of what it means for employees, increasingly now people expect diversity in the workforce and in business and in places of work. There's been many surveys done. I used to work at Edelman, and we did an annual trust barometer, and there's an increasing expectation and demand of employees to have diverse workforces, and that's something I think for all organisations to be aware of, that it's not something that's like a nice to have, it's actually an expectation. And it's not just an expectation of employees, it's also an expectation of people's clients, their customers, in terms of what those workplaces look like. And in a world where we now talk about ESG, which is the way in which companies are appraised. ESG stands for Environment, Society and Governance. That's how companies increasingly are being interrogated. The S is all about people in businesses. And it's not now just something that companies like to have or think it's a good thing. It's like there is an expectation. So I also today sit on the board of Cazoo, which is the car company. I chair the ESG committee, and there is an expectation by by some of our investors to look and interrogate what the business is doing when it comes to our people, and specifically looking at metrics and things like diversity. So the starting point is, it's not like, oh, maybe this is a good idea. It's increasingly an imperative, and that all organisations have to consider seriously. And why is it important? Because if you have diversity, true diversity in a workforce, you do better work. You have it's not just a singular view. It's not just a one type of person. Actually, if I reflect on the work that I did for the clients when I was head of the advocacy practice at Edelman, having those blended teams, having people with diverse backgrounds and experiences from all walks of life, from looking at the whole array of protected characteristics. It's not just confined to diversity of race or background. Actually, we were able to do better things for the people that we served, and whether that's clients in an agency or whether it's from a government perspective in local government, whatever it may be, not just having that singular view makes a difference. So that would be my answer.
Brilliant. And Tony, how do we? You advise most of the companies, I think, in the country. How can we advise from a top-down system? How do we bring that diversity in?
Well, first of all, Mazel Tov, happy birthday. I never liked birthdays, and COVID has changed my mind. And quite a lot of my friends, actually, we now really proactively celebrate birthdays. And so I'm delighted that we're celebrating Resources' birthday. Bis 120, as my grandmother would say. I think something really interesting has happened in diversity. And in a way, that actually a lot of people who are really passionate about diversity are a little bit concerned about, which is I think because of Black Lives Matters, we've started to, rather than constantly think in an intersectional way, we've started to go almost class by class in diversity, right? So there was real progress made on gender, although clearly not enough. Then we thought really hard last year about race, although clearly that's not done either. And now I find in my workplace and a lot of companies and talking to people responsible for the diversity agenda, there's this sort of weird thing where we're sort of going class by class to make sure that we're doing right by that potential area of discrimination. A lot more talk now about neurodiversity and class, as everybody will know. I'm personally deeply interested in age, because many of you may or may not know, but we are starting to lose in the last year 50 and 60-year-olds from the workplace. It's actually a very big problem. I hope it's not a problem for those of you who are 50 or 60 and have left the workplace. You may be having a great time, but it's actually a very big problem for the country, and I think it's a problem for companies. So my first observation is, I don't know if I have a value judgment on it, but people aren't, because I think Black Lives Matter's changed it. It sort of forced us to stop thinking about every class and trying to operate a diversity as a sort of generic blob, but to actually go strategy by strategy. So I just make that observation. I have felt that the best companies that I have seen who've done really good work on diversity, and specifically on inclusion, have done as much on championing and celebrating diversity as they have on the sort of political rights-based approach. There are clearly some employment rights that are critical to diversity. But the most diverse workforces that have been the most successful that I've seen, there's been genuine exchange and celebration of different kinds of diversity. And a genuine interest, therefore, a curiosity amongst employees for people of all kinds of diversity. And I think that whilst I think there is much about diversity that should be a political movement, I'm much more interested in firms that create celebrations of diversity amongst their workforce. That stuff, I think, makes it just much more high impact in companies.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Alex, opening thoughts on how we generate, and you've started a business, you've scaled it, and now you're doing it again. How do you bake in diversity in policies from the very beginning?
Making me feel tired just talking about scaling another business. I think this might be my last one. Thank you so much for having me. So I guess, one kind of window into this is, I think, most people in the room are Jewish, and for most of our history, the odds have been stacked against us when it has come to fulfilling our potential. And fortunately, that is no longer so much the case. There remains a problem, but it's no longer such the case in the UK. But it remains the case that many other groups have odds heavily stacked against them it is very far from a level playing field. And I think what's been happening over the last 10, 20 years, much accelerated by Black Lives Matter, is that there has been a change of zeitgeist from a kind of, yeah, tough luck. You know, life is a lottery and you might get a good card or you might get a bad card, to there is a fundamental moral issue at play here, and there is being on the right side of history and there's being on the wrong side of history. And that is now becoming a mainstream view. This is becoming the zeitgeist whereby people no longer say it's good enough to say you have an advantage in life by virtue of your birth. But I also think what is happening is people are seeing there is an alignment with self-interest, if you like. There is, as with many things that accelerate quickly, some enlightened self-interest at play. And so what we see kind of, I guess, in the company day to day, and we're hiring, you know, people kind of every week as starting in their roles, is people, there are real benefits to bringing in diverse teams, and the diverse teams within the company do better because they have diversity of perspectives, and people who are older and younger and from different backgrounds and socioeconomic classes think about problems differently. Whereas if you have a group of people who are pretty similar, you are much more likely to have groupthink, and groupthink is almost never a useful thing. So there's been lots of reports done, and you know, McKinsey say X, Y, and Z, and Accenture and all the rest, but like this is something that we actually do see day to day within the company. And then I guess another kind of angle I have onto this is, just to give a bit more kind of context of what we're doing at Beam, is we take referrals of very disadvantaged people, typically homeless people. They live in women's refuges and hostels, and they're referred by government to us. We give them a caseworker. We work out what their financial barriers are. We crowdfund all of those financial barriers on a tech platform that we've built. And then, this is the relevant bit, we support them into a job at employers that we partner with. And when we got going with this about 4 years ago, we were going to companies and saying, we have a diverse talent pool for you. And these are people who are really struggling in society, and more than 60% of them are people of color, and you should see the potential in this cohort of people. And it was a tougher sell than it is today. And there has been a real shift. And now we have companies coming to us all the time because for many of the reasons Luciana was talking about, there is these expectations among all their stakeholders, but there is also this enlightened self-interest point. And today we are working with Bupa and Arriva and Royal Mail and Aesop and Pret a Manger and loads of other brands to help them fulfill, I think, both their moral and their commercial responsibilities.
Brilliant. And at the other end of this, at the other end of the table, at the other end of this is Livity. And I guess, Alex, you are actually probably on the coal face of getting a diverse population into work. So you're going to have a very unique perspective on this as well.
Yeah, thank you. And also thank you to everybody first for having me on the panel today, like everyone else up here today. It's such an honour to be here on your 30th anniversary. Yeah, at Livity, I think it's really interesting. I mean, so 8 years ago, to the point of lots of studies of proving that diverse workforces produce better work, 8 years ago, I was part of something called the Great British Diversity Experiment to seek to prove that more diverse teams led to better creativity. Fast forward 8 years, I think we should all be so encouraged with the tidal wave that has happened when it comes to this narrative. I think for me, the one thing which feels very practical to talk about here, which is there is a huge amount that has been done in terms of encouraging a more diverse workforce into specific sectors and most sectors broadly. I would say the challenge that we still see is not just about attraction, but about retention. Currently, there is a lot of time and effort being put into how do we get some brilliant, in our case, early stage careers, young people into the kind of businesses that they want to be part of. But actually, the challenge that we are still seeing is that people are leaving organisations within their first 6 months quite quickly because their structures haven't been put in place to enable them to thrive. And often people still feeling othered in those spaces. So I think for me, we talk about diversity, let's talk about equity, and let's talk about equity in the workplace. That is where we need to be, where people can get into a position and know that they have an opportunity to grow within that organisation. And that, a lot of the time what we see is the diversity initiatives are still coming at a CA level, which is exactly where it should be. However, lots of the work that we're doing is actually going and making sure that we're training line managers and bias training happening at line manager level to actually encourage the retention of people in the industries, because that's actually even more damaging to individuals when they get somewhere and they feel like, actually, this is not for me. And so that would be my point on, we've made some brilliant strides. How do we continue to go further now?
Amazing. I mean, you can see we've got an amazing panel, and we're going to struggle to get through everything in an hour, but there's so much insight here. We're going to go to the audience, and we've got, just to prime you, Trish Ward, who is an advisory council member. We're going to come to you in a second, if you can make yourself known so they can get a microphone to you. There you are. Just before we do, a bit of audience participation. There is, just as mentioned just now, it's happening at the sea level, but it has to happen, it has to be woven into the fabric of everything. Talking about gender and just picking up some gender points, a bit of audience participation. What percentage of board members in the UK, in UK businesses, are women? Anyone know? Shout it out, any numbers. 20%? 10? 8? It's 30%. We're knocking at 30%. 3 in 10 board members in the UK, according to the Deloitte Women in the Boardroom report from February this year, are women. That's below. So 30%, that's below France, which is 43%, and others. Now, venture capital funds. What percentage of founders that received venture capital funding in 2021 were female? 5? 3? Under 10? 2.3%. Now, if you want to go up the chain, we're talking hundreds of millions and billions of pounds. If we're going up the chain, what percentage of decision makers in venture capital funds who deploy that money are female? Even lower. 1%? No. 12%. There's a direct correlation between. So this is what these guys and their businesses are working towards. Right, we're going to go to. Or it's not all audience participation. You have to earn your canapes. We're going to go to Trish Ward, who's got a question for the panel.
Now that Brexit is a reality, do the panel see a potential risk to the current ruling on age discrimination and a return to forcing older employees to retire at a particular age or earlier than they might wish to? And conversely, were it to happen, would there be advantages?
Luciana, do you want to take that one?
I mean, I don't think there's a challenge. I think we're currently seeing a massive war on talent, and actually increasingly, it's more of an employees marketplace than it is an employers marketplace in lots of different sectors. And we have an issue that we, as Tony alluded to, we've got older people. I say older, kind of at later stages in their employment journey, in their 50s and 60s, coming out of the workforce, and actually we need more people in the workforce. So, looking at the economics of it, and having recently heard a presentation from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, actually we need more people throughout the generations into their 50s and 60s, and in fact into their 70s that in the workplace, particularly when we don't have people from Europe currently, or we have fewer people coming into our workforce from Europe as a result of Brexit. So I don't think there's any prospect of that age changing, and actually also increasingly for pension funds as well, we need more people working longer. So my view is that I don't see that as a challenge at this time.
Tony, do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's exactly the opposite. I have been in many discussions with policymakers and chief executives, all desperate to try and get people at later stages in life coming back into work, and a big debate about the people that have left after the pandemic. Are they going to run out of money in a high inflation world and come back, fingers crossed, because we need them back, or not? We could take a poll. So I think that's completely the other way. Now, that said, I do think there is a different intergenerational tension, and you will have seen some of it in recent weeks when it comes to the government's fiscal policy, right? So essentially increasing pensions at a time when the cost of living is terribly difficult and taxes have gone up for working people. I think that is a question of intergenerational fairness. The politics of it are straightforward. Pensioners vote, young people don't. I think that's where the debate is much more interesting. But no, I don't think there's a risk at all of what you describe.
Thank you, Trish. Just before we move on to the next section, I just want to say, has anyone else got a question, a burning desire to ask a question of the panel on how we build diverse workforces? There's a question over here.
Thanks. Very interesting discussion. My name is Paul Ribb, and I just wanted to throw into the mix the one word that's missing from your panel on diversity, which is disability, mainly because that's probably the most untapped resource that many recruiters tend to ignore, but yet is actually one of the most resourceful and most productive of employee cohorts. So I just wondered whether any of them have had any experience in disability diversity.
Anyone on the panel?
I can say something. We have been looking at this incredibly closely in the last few months, not only in our organisation, but across the economy. There's also now a renewed political focus on it because everybody is discussing labour shortages in the economy and the fact that there are 5 million people unable to work, and that being an absolute talent pool. Now that's becoming a bit politicised because there's lots of conversations going on about lots of people possibly having long COVID, and do they really have long COVID, and what's really going on. So it's getting mushy around, I think, the talent pool you're describing, which is, you know, people with significant disability who've never really been able to get into the labour market. The labour market's never really gone after them. And it's getting a bit cloudy in that debate. But I think employers will definitely start to do that because they are short of labour and they are being more thoughtful about it. I don't know about recruiters, but employers are talking about it more.
Just going to go to Alex Goat at the end first. Alex.
Oh, sorry, me. No, I mean, we as Livity, I guess we look very broadly at kind of all sectors. We haven't done anything specifically around disability. We have an increasing remit, I guess, with our clients around neurodiversity, which is obviously a very kind of interesting point, not completely linked to your question there earlier on. But yeah, I think employers are really waking up to the opportunity that lies there, but also, I guess, how to create internal cultures which enable people, as I say, with different levels of ability, physical and mental, to thrive within those. So I think that's probably a long way to go. And as Tony was saying before, I think sometimes people are picking off verticals when it comes to diversity.
Yeah, so just very briefly, if Alex or Luciana wanted to add anything.
So forgive me that I didn't specify and say specifically disability, but I certainly meant it when I said protected characteristics. Obviously, that's a very official term, but it's a really important point that you raised. I've worked in certainly the work that I did in Parliament, and then the work that I did at Edelman. I've done a lot of work specifically around mental health disability. And obviously disability comes in different forms, lots of disabilities that we can see and many that we can't see. And kind of really working within those workplaces to make sure that we welcome people with both hidden disabilities and physical disabilities as well. So it's a really important point because I don't think enough has been done right across the board, both in the public and private sector. And as Tony alluded to, we just need to be doing more across all protected characteristics, but certainly disability is one where there's such opportunity. You know, it's that diversity of person from whatever background and whatever their both challenges and opportunities bring. So thank you for raising it.
Yeah, just to bring this section to a close, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, just briefly 2 points. So I think this is the sort of the first wave of companies getting serious about diversity and inclusion. And in this kind of first wave, it tends to be a bit simplistic in some ways. So it's like people are going to look at our company page and are there enough women and are there enough ethnic minorities, like being kind of crude. That's sort of this first wave. But we will get more sophisticated and we will get better at measuring things like disabilities, less obvious things that are, you know, equally important. And there's a whole wave of software businesses that will power that, and there are a whole wave of kind of other factors that will, I think, catalyse that. And the second point is I think government has done quite a lot on trying to get employers to hire people with disabilities. They've done a lot in this sort of disability confident certifications, and they've pushed that really, really hard. What I would like to see from government is tax incentives to hire people with disabilities and more broadly long-term unemployed people. And you have those kinds of incentives in France, and they're very effective. So I think, you know, speaking to companies' wallets is always quite an effective way to speed things up. So that's something I'd like to see from people in power.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm gonna have to get my. How does Dimbleby do this in an hour? It's pre-recorded, isn't it? So this is phenomenal. We're going to move on to the second question now, the second area. Keep thinking of questions. But we're going to talk about what everyone's calling the new normal. I don't ever know what that means because it changes from day to day and from seemingly village to village. But how have the workforce's expectations for work evolved post-pandemic? And giving an example from my own world, I now have candidates calling me, and I think Luciana said it's become a candidate, it's an employee rather than an employer market. Candidates can get whatever they want at the moment. It's been an absolute feeding frenzy. I've got junior and senior candidates calling me saying, I want a new job, and I'm not interested in anything more than 2 days a week in the office. Not, is there any flexibility? What's the policy? So I'm not interested. Don't speak to me unless it's fully remote, or I can have 3 days at home, or I could do lunch times off, and I could do school time. So I guess the question I want to ask is, what does the new normal look like in a way that's going to be beneficial for both the employer and the employee? And maybe I'll start with Tony on this one.
Well, I think, look, the truth is we're working it out, right? I mean, there is about to be a glut of what's the new workplace conferences. We're doing one as well. We were going to do one a year ago, and then I said, no, nobody is. If anyone's doing a conference a year ago, they have no idea what's in it. And we are starting to see some pattern recognition. I think one of the most interesting distinctions that the new normal needs to normalize is the difference between hybrid working and flexible working. And that has got a bit cloudy in the last sort of 6 months. And it's really important to understand the distinction, right? Flexible work is about a contract between employee and employer about the hours I am going to work, the needs of my life, the employer respecting the fact that you either have caring needs or you have other responsibilities and you want to work in a certain way, and that is pre-agreed. Hybrid working is only a question of where you work. And I don't think it's true to say that hybrid work allows me to take the kids to school or allows me to take afternoons off. That's a different thing. Hybrid work is about, does my job need to be in the office or can my job be online? I hope that we evolve both. I mean, I think flexible, there's a lot of people, and people in my place of work are big believers in we have to get everybody back to the office. It's absolutely fundamental for productivity. It's unproven, by the way. I mean, I have yet to see a good study about whether or not it's good or bad for productivity. I think it depends on the workplace and the firm. But what is very clear from the pandemic is that more flexible work, which again I distinguish from hybrid work, is particularly good, coming back to the diversity question, is particularly good for helping people be in work as well as balancing other responsibilities. It was particularly a good thing for women and carers. And so I am really reluctant to join the bandwagon that says we need to get everybody back in the office. Much as I am madly frustrated that everybody is not back in my office, and I really am, and I want them all to come back, I think it's a net positive, particularly relating back to the diversity question.
Yeah, I was going to ask the former minister about Jacob Rees-Mogg's memo, so she's killed that line in my script. But yeah, thank you. Alex.
So I think what happened with COVID was millions of leaders and CEOs all around the world, did these sort of speeches to their teams where they sort of said, your well-being is our #1 priority. And this is what we care about, and I want you to know that, and all these sorts of things. And then, the pandemic is hopefully, on its way out. And it's pretty hard to backpedal from that and go, actually, we need to hit our quarterly numbers. That's kind of our #1 priority right now. And you have employees going, but hang on a second, I thought my well-being and my mental health was the most important thing. That's what you were saying a year ago. It's not anymore. So there's it's being quite hard for companies to backpedal, and they've often sort of dug their own grave in some respects. So I think what we're seeing now is this kind of tension, and it is in companies all around the world. You have employees saying, I want this, and this is very varied in nature, and people are very specific in their requests and requirements, and you have companies trying to work it all out. Now, I think what I see sort of anecdotally is that there is no one-size-fits-all. You might have an older employee who has like childcare responsibilities and they maybe live in a larger property and they really want to work from home and it's really good for their family life and their mental and physical well-being and so on. And then you might have a junior employee who is working from their bedroom living in somewhere in, you know, much more central in a city, and it's really bad for their mental health and well-being to be, you know, spending 20 hours a day in the same, you know, smallish room. That's just no good for them. So I think we will see this sort of fragmentation where people begin to think about the companies they work for, kind of bearing in mind these new vectors of flexible and hybrid and so on. But we're also seeing adaptation due to kind of, you know, employer demand. We have an all-time high of vacancies, and, you know, one other anecdote is we work with a lot of women who have been living in refuges. Mostly they've been victims of domestic abuse. And we also work with Bupa, who need to hire a lot of carers. And Bupa have now changed, and I absolutely praise them for this, they have changed their hiring practices and they've introduced a load more flexibility on shifts because they know that the women they are hiring through Beam have childcare responsibilities. Right. And so I think we're also seeing, you know, increasing flexibility just through necessity.
Fascinating. Alex, you're probably working with people who are joining the workforce for the first time now, having joined at the beginning of the pandemic, so first time in physical office space.
It was hilarious because all of the young people we work with adapted to online working so much quicker. We're like, sorry that you're online, and they're like, I'm online all day anyway. Why does it make any difference? I mean, I think the thing that's really interesting for me is that out of everyone in this room, there's almost probably none of us that have the same working patterns as each other, which actually, if you think back 3 years, anybody that worked full time was in an office 5 days a week, and the only people that weren't doing that were probably parents who were doing part-time working. Now, we're all working different patterns, and as leaders of businesses, we're all having to try and work that out ourselves and work what's best for our people, what's best for our productivity, and that will be different compared to different kinds of sectors and individual businesses. Even in our sector, in the kind of advertising and marketing world, businesses are doing completely different things. And then one of the things I think is interesting around that is when we look at, we're all talking about the talent crisis, we're all kind of feeling it now. I've had people, our office is in Brixton, and I had someone who lives in West Norwood, which is an 8-minute bus ride, saying, I'm only applying for a remote working job. I was like, I'm only asking you to come in 2 days a week. I'm really confused about this. But what it does mean is that people, we went, okay, well then we're not the place for you. Because actually what we value is that productivity and that creativity and collaboration. But individuals are able to choose now in a way, and as our employers, and I think that is really, really interesting when we think about the kind of life that we want to do. And one other small point I think is really interesting is we work with lots of young startups for whom office costs were ridiculous, and actually now they're able to scale their businesses in a different way because remote working is a thing. Doesn't look like they're all working out of their bedroom. They have a choice, and actually their businesses are thriving in a different way. So yeah, I think it's a very interesting time for all of us.
I'm going to come to Luciana in a second. Before we do, just panel, all of us, come with a show of your fingers on your hand. How many days a week do your businesses, our businesses, require people to be physically in the office? Oh, there you go. There you go. So everyone's doing different things regardless of size, scale, or talent pool. Luciana.
I think what we've seen as a result of the pandemic is just people reappraise their lives. And whereas I think prior to the pandemic, we saw a lot more people living to work. I think we see a lot more now people kind of having had different experiences through the pandemic and now thinking about how they can work to live. And as a result of that, there's different expectations of people in the workplace. And it's a combination of whether people, the hybrid bit and also the hours. There are still some incredibly rigid employers out there, but they are going to falter because increasing the expectation, not just of the entrance into the workplace, not just the graduates, but people at all ages. People have seen the benefit of being at home, being able to manage whatever caring responsibilities they may have, not just confined to children. Perhaps they're caring for a parent or a partner, and people want that flexibility. And I just, I think this is going to be a necessity for employers to wake up and smell the coffee. There's two things. I think there's some really exciting stuff going on with the experiments around a number of employers that have signed up to the 4-day working week.
Right.
And I think that's really exciting because I think it can show how people can be as productive and do the same in 4 days that they might do in 5, and to give people the space to enjoy their lives as well. And that's really exciting. I think conversely, there's still a responsibility for employers, particularly for early entrants into the workplace, not just graduates, but people, kind of the younger generations who, for whom it might be their first or second job, to support people and to bring people together.
Right.
Now, that's not for every young person, but I've seen it as someone who's recruited many graduates or people that have come out of college, not necessarily with a degree, that it's experiencing working in ways that you just don't do when you're in education. And there is a role for employers to play to support those young people into that employment journey. And it doesn't have to be 5 days a week, but it does mean bringing people together for experiencing team, experiencing collaboration, to learn through osmosis. There's only so much you can learn through a screen. I know that as someone who started a completely different role in lockdown, I was in the office as much as I possibly could because I had to learn like a whole new way of living. So, I think to do actually mentoring and development, again, it's that human connection that can often enhance it. So there certainly aren't studies that say that you have to be in an office, but there are still, I think, certain responsibilities for an employer in whatever sector to really support those young people into that work journey, which require face-to-face contact.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that serendipitous passing of the desk, not a 30-minute Zoom conversation, but that just picking up by osmosis. Our graduates, we're employing a lot of graduates, and they don't get that listening by osmosis, you say, at the desk. I'm going to throw some questions if anyone's got. We've got a couple. We can take one question on this section, but with that gentleman over there. Before we do, another bit of audience participation. An organisation called Wonder went round every continent on the Earth, bar Antarctica, and asked 3,000 businesses on an 8-day working week. Sorry, on an 8-hour working day, how many hours of productivity on average does an office-based employee deliver? Does anyone know? Out of 8? 4, regardless of geography of continent, because there's the coffee, there's the tea break, there's the lunchtime. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing or not, but there's other ways we can augment the workforce. There's a question. Just gentleman at the back was the first to, and then we're going to move on to the next question.
Thank you. If I could just give an employer's perspective in relation to home working, because I think it's very important to think about employers as well. I run a law firm, we employ about 90 people. And one of the challenges you have with people working from home is that it becomes very, very easy for them to be quite transient, right, in terms of which firm they work for. If you're, I've just lost one particular member of staff who got poached by another law firm. She joined me during the pandemic. And when we started saying to people to come back in and we said 2 days a week, I couldn't get her back in the office. I could never get her back in the office. And I didn't do anything about it. It was fine. I just asked her to come in, and every now and then she might appear for a day, but then she'd disappear again for another couple of months. Now, for her, she was just working in any law firm. It didn't matter which law firm she worked for. She was working from home. She never came into the office, therefore she never really met people. She never got to know the firm. She never got to know the culture of the firm and her colleagues. So it became very, very easy. And also, of course, it's very, very easy to be interviewed these days. If you're sitting at home, you can do 20 interviews, and I've got no idea what's going on. So it's very easy for those sort of people just to move around. Because the reality is, if you're working from home, whether you work for my firm or any firm, it doesn't really matter. So I think from an employer's perspective, it is really important for people to come in at least 2 days a week, just so they get to meet their colleagues and they get to understand the culture of the firm that they're part of.
A really good point. I mean, I'm on the other side of that because I'm a recruiter, so it's been amazing for me. No one has to pretend to go to the dentist every 6 months. But no, I understand the point. But that transience, a really, really valid point. I'm going to go. We have to remember why we're here, which is for resource, and we're very fortunate that a client testimonials now are going to be given to us very briefly from Zev Portner, who is over there. So if we can get a microphone to Zev, that'd be great. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Just to say that Resource was very helpful in my job search, getting work, in terms of the innovative seminars that I attended, which were excellent, which enabled me to develop new skills. The expertise that I gained from one-to-one advisors, which helped me tremendously in CV. And above all, I'll never forget Jerry's here in terms of the mock interview that I did at Resource, which was very useful indeed. In fact, after one mock interview, I had a real interview at Buckinghamshire New University, and I got a job as a law lecturer. So, wonderful news.
Amazing. Thanks, Zev. We're going to move on to our next section. So the future of work. So imagine the Jetsons. That's what I always thought it would be. So what do we think the world of work's going to look like in a world where words are being thrown at us like digital, automation, robotics, AI, in a globalized era? So Alex Stephanie, who started a couple of companies.
Taking me by surprise, I'll have to do this. Well, so I work in tech, and people in tech like throwing around kind of big, wacky ideas, and some of those ideas are that artificial intelligence will kind of dominate every industry, and there will be no work to do because it will all be algorithms, and we will have to introduce universal basic income and just pay people to do nothing because there's nothing to do. I think that's kind of crap. I think new jobs will be created as innovation happens, and we just don't know what these jobs are. And it's a bit kind of like, for millions of years, people have been saying, there's too many people and da-da-da. And you innovate and you change, and there's this sense of, we all know that a task can take as long as you allow it to take. There's a sort of equivalent macroeconomically, I think. And not least is fixing the world that we're doing quite a good job of destroying. My parents in the audience, and they will know that I would find it quite a lot of work just to tidy up my room. I think it's going to be even more work to tidy up the whole planet, and that's going to create millions of jobs. And the work in that sphere has really just, no pun intended, just begun. So I think probably we've sort of over-egged the utopianism of it, and there'll be plenty more jobs ahead of us.
Good to know. Alex, at the end.
I would echo everything that Alex has just said. I guess from where we sit, when we do a lot of work, and we've got a digital platform which is about helping young people understand what potential digital careers there might be out there for them. I think in one thing there are some common skills which are useful and applicable: critical thinking, communication, all of those as well, which will evolve and are the kind of things that young people really, really need in terms of thinking whatever that might be. I think none of us know what those jobs might be in the future. I do think that there is a challenge, though, that at a careers guidance level, those people responsible for helping young people get into careers don't even understand the jobs that there are now. And that's kind of part of the challenge when it comes to, I guess, the world which is increasingly more technological, increasingly looking at things like ESGs. Actually the careers advice service is really still very archaic. So I don't think young people are necessarily getting the best advice as to what to do now already with the jobs that are here. So that doesn't answer the question. I think there's still a job to be done in terms of what people will be doing like now and in the next few years.
And on that, just looking at Luciana and pardon me, and Tony, does that bring in the kind of levelling up agenda? Like, how do is this a re-education piece as well? Because we've spoken about age and diversity of education, but does this introduce where levelling up comes in to make people future-proof in their own employment? Or just answer whatever you want to answer. It's absolutely fine.
I'm not the best placed to discuss the government's levelling up agenda. It's a really important concept, and if we can make it a reality, that'd be brilliant to really address some of the challenges when it comes to diversity of geography, and to ensure diversity and to ensure real equality of opportunity for the whole of the UK, whichever country it may be. So yes, if we can level up all countries and ensure that we're giving every young person, no matter where they're born, the best chances and the opportunities across the UK, then that would be brilliant. I think there's a long road ahead to really make that a reality, but I very warmly welcome it if it was to materialise. I think kind of the question about where are we going. There is. I'm really excited about the future. I think there is so many different opportunities, and certainly, we've had a little bit about kind of like the future of the planet, and we're on this kind of road to net zero at the moment. Actually, what comes next is how we're net positive. And there are so many opportunities when it comes to green jobs, for people of all different backgrounds. If we can make that a reality, that in itself will create hundreds of thousands of jobs, not just in this country, but across the UK. And in terms of making sure we equip the next generation, it's so great to see so many places of education at all levels. I mean, I see it in my kids' primary school, but right the way through, looking at those softer skills. Alex talked about kind of critical thinking. It's not just about the key subjects, which are really, really important, but it's how do we future-proof and equip that next generation to ensure that whatever comes their way, that they have the diversity of thought and they have the softer skills, particularly the interpersonal skills. Because yes, when we see increasing automation, what's going to really count is the service. Is what we do, kind of what we broadly call services. So. That's where the opportunities are going to come, and I think it's really exciting.
Brilliant. Tony?
Well, I'm trying to piece. I'm still stuck by your live to work, work to live. I'm thinking very hard about that, and it reminds me a little bit of what you were just saying about the employer perspective, because I think the contract of employment is going to change. Where I think, although I sort of agree that people will want to work to live, I think we are ending the boundary between the two. So I think the idea that I am a different person at work, I clock in, I clock out, and then I lead my full life, I think that is changing because of the pandemic, and I think it's changing generationally, and younger generations' expectations of work. And how is it changing? So I think that work, we learned during the pandemic, that work is an important part of people's lives. It's a place where I get in and on in life. It's a framework for life, identity and purpose. It's a place that has to now care about my physical and mental health. It's a place that I increasingly will expect to build my skills and employability. It's a place that I'm going to find companionship and purpose. And therefore, I think to your point, because you're right, you're not the only employer who makes that argument, almost every employer I know right now is revisiting their employee value proposition. Yeah. Right? They're revisiting the employee deal. And I think work is going to need to offer more than just the right hours and the right pay, and even the right flex. I think work is going to need to offer a place where people can be a bit more, sorry, I'm about to get pretentious, self-actualized. It's got to work for their life, it's got to work for their values, it's got to work for their family and their aspirations. Whilst at the same time, doing all of that, and yet I totally agree with you, not being something that is all-consuming, all-absorbing. Right? I think we've already seen this with millennials in the workplace who deceptively want to bring more of themselves to work, yet at the same time walk away and control how much they do that. And I think work is going to be a more emotive connection, whilst at the same time that doesn't mean what it might have meant 20 years ago, which is that I'm still in the office at 11 o'clock at night. So I think something that's quite soft is happening already to the nature of the contract of work.
Thank you. Well, I had two questions thrown in here. Mike, the resource chair of trustees, I hope you don't mind, but I think your question's actually been asked and answered. You asked about 4-day working weeks, hybrid working from home, and admin tasks can be completed by automation and AI. So I hope you'll forgive me if we say that's asked and answered. Thank you. But we do have a question from Marilyn Vertes, who's a resource volunteer. Marilyn?
It's clear from newspaper reports that many UK businesses are suffering from skill shortages, mainly as a result of Brexit and consequent changes to immigration rules. How can British businesses survive this skill deficit and meet the needs of the internal UK market and compete internationally?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, answer in a haiku, if you don't mind.
Is the Prime Minister still in office, by the way? He is, okay, fine. Just because I thought I might distract away from that unbelievably hard question. Look, I think there's two things. First of all, employers are suffering from labour shortages and skill shortages. Labour shortages is just the sheer volume of people, right? There's just mass vacancies everywhere. Skill shortages are exactly what you describe. Look, I think that the truthful political reality we as employers are confronting right now is a government arguably representing a country that is unhappy with open immigration, right? I'm sure not everybody is happy with that position in the room, but that is the government's position. And what they're really saying is immigration drove down wages, And therefore, if we curtail immigration, we'll drive up wages. And that has indeed happened, although how much of that has been driven by inflation, don't know. So it's a pretty complicated labour market discussion. And the truth is, nobody understands the labour market right now, including the Bank of England, which is why they really haven't understood what's been going on with inflation. So it's an unbelievably hard question. But I think where policy will get to is that they will need to join immigration policy and skills policy. What we have argued for is to say, look, this is really very simple. The country needs to, 1, work out the skills it needs. 2, work out what skills can we get from Britain, from within. And then 3, decide for the skills that we can't get from within, we need to therefore think about immigration, with one caveat, which is important to this government, may not be important to other governments, which is, okay, we'll allow immigration for a bit, but only on a fixed term basis. You need a plan for how you're going to grow some of those skills at home. And so we saw with HGV drivers, you know, a slightly pathetic concession in the end that will allow them, but only up until Christmas Eve, with about 6 weeks to go. But it was, I think, a sign of something I think will come, which is the government will be forced to allow for more immigration, but it will be very fixed term, and therefore it might not work. And there's a really profound difficulty I hear from employers, from hoteliers. I basically hear there's no one left to do room service, and British people won't do room service, and you could pay them double and they still wouldn't do room service. All the way through to very high skilled industries saying we just don't have enough PhDs in that subject matter and we need to let people in. So I think we're really struggling with your question. And the only reason why we haven't solved it as a country is because lots of other countries are solving it, or are grappling with it, and so it allows policymakers to say, let's wait and see. But I think because of Brexit, Britain has an extra need to solve it. I worry that the current government is not politically motivated to solve it.
Thank you. I think that's a pretty comprehensive answer, that the panel will agree that we can move on. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer, Tony. We're going to move on to the final question. Bang on time, actually. I'm going to throw it to the audience. Does anyone know how we define Gen Z, Gen Z? What is a Gen Z person? Anyone know? Shout out. What year were Gen Z born? 1984. 1984? No. 1990? Any advance on 1990? 2000? You're closest, I think. Alex would tell us.
16 to 18 to 24.
Yeah, so exactly. So we're gonna talk the last few minutes on the future workforce, the current graduate workforce, Gen Z. So if you think about it, we go Generation X, Generation Millennials, Baby Boomers, Generation X, Millennials, and now Gen Z or Gen Z. And I think what I'm learning from my side is that we don't understand them at all. But thankfully, we've got Alex, who is the Gen Z whisperer. And so I guess the first question to Alex, we're going to go down the panel. How are Gen Z, who are they? How are they different to the rest of us? And what do they want, need, and expect from employers and in the workplace?
Just a small question then.
Yeah, go on.
Well, I mean, I think it is difficult because we are categorising, you know, we've just talked about different generations, we're categorising huge swathes of people, even if we're just talking about in the UK, just by virtue of when they were born. I think, but there are definitely sort of similarities. I think what we see, and I guess this may not be new news to people if they've read it, or perhaps you have children or relations in that kind of age group, is that point of being much more purpose-driven in general. And I think that is we can talk about this kind of growing up in an era of technology, but access to so much information means that you're able to make decisions on the value proposition that you have in your life based on that. I think the big difference that we've seen, like Gen Z over the last couple of years, and our whole lives, all of our lives have been fueled by uncertainty. But this generation, not only had a huge increase in access to technology and access to information, which is unprecedented and often unfiltered, you've also got this unbelievable amount of uncertainty in terms of the disruption that's happened at my school, at my university, with my family, all of these different things. And actually that is creating a very, very different outlook on what the world should look like for them. And I mean, there's lots and lots of things that we could talk about with this audience. But I think when it comes to the specific topic we're talking about today in terms of employment, the things that we sort of see is, like, you just talk about the intergenerationals, like lots of Gen Z's parents are Gen X. And whether their parents have earned 16 grand a year or 600 grand a year, they've gone, looked at my parents and they're not very happy. Why do I want to follow in that same footsteps? This doesn't look like a smart pattern. And to be honest, they're probably right. I can't imagine going back into work 5 days a week and doing all the things I've done again. But I do think it has really changed their outlook on life to lots of the things that we're saying today. I think the biggest thing is that this values driver, really, and actually making decisions not just on who that they're employed by, but also, you know, who they want to buy from as a brand, where they want to be, based on the values that I have. And those values are not homogenous. Sustainability is not a value now. It's a given. So I think, you know, when we're talking about ESGs and everything, that is something that every company should do. But actually, things like, I'm just coming into the world of work, and all of a sudden workers' rights are really important to me, because it's actually, as a young person developing in their own career, it is still things that feel relatively close to them in terms of their own lived experience. So I think lots of the stuff we were talking about earlier on about the future of work is relevant there. But I do think we have to recognise that for a lot of the time when it comes to the next generation, they may feel like they have a very different viewpoint, but they also always do signify what's coming next for all of us. Right. So actually, all of the things that we're talking about up here today, they have said, I don't want my work to be like this, and now we're all going, oh yeah, cool. I think that point of them signifying what will come next for all of us and them demanding that is different.
Yeah, I think Luciana said it before when she said work to live and live to work, with someone defined it to me as Gen Z, different to the generations before. For them, happiness is success, rather than previous generations where success is happiness, all the way around. But they want to make a better work-life balance for themselves through work. Luciana.
I had lunch today with a chief executive and a managing director, and they were berating Generation Z. The word that kind of often gets bandied about, which I think is massively unfair, is that the generation's entitled. As someone who's employed many people from Generation Z, I look at it very differently and see it very much as aspirational. And actually, you know, I commend and kind of really have a lot of admiration for Gen Z that come in and have these higher expectations. It's not confined to Generation Z. You know, it's increasing. We're seeing society move. We've discussed that over the course of this past hour, where we just generally, as a population, have higher expectations of the places that we work. You know, the businesses and organisations that we turn up to work every day for, and the positions that they take. So, you know, they are the future, and people have to wake up and smell the coffee and realise that they embody what is coming next. So. It's a challenge because it's different. You know, certainly it's not. You know, and if I think about when I came into the workplace, you know, I had a very different outlook and did not have the confidence that they have, and did not have the expectations that they do have. But they're absolutely right to have those expectations. And as I said, I really commend the aspiration that brings.
I agree. I think we're all surprised by their confidence, but we're all a bit envious that we didn't have it. To say it to our bosses that we don't like the way they looked at us or spoke to us or didn't give us time off. Tony.
First of all, I'd like to say I love my eldest son. Anything I'm about to say in no way detracts from my love for my eldest son. Secondly, I'm going to try and be just contradictory, just to make it a bit more spiky at the end. I definitely agree that Gen Z/Z are coming into work with this set of ideals. I think their wake up and smell the coffee moment is going to be about money. And it's going to be about the fact that they're entering an inflationary world. And that certainly if they live in big cities like London, they are going to have to live at home with their parents, which is not a lot of fun. And my experience of the millennial generation, who have therefore had wonderful values of work and have been incredibly entitled and have utterly struggled to own homes in a country that prizes home ownership way above renting, and therefore that's a really distorted market. And they are now pressing aggressively to earn more money and demanding higher salaries and getting back to an incredibly familiar thing we always knew about work, which is we work to earn money. to have the life we want. And so what I'm intrigued by is what happens when Gen Z come into the workplace like this, confront a set of devastating economics that therefore force them to think and make those trade-offs about, I actually really need to earn more money, and I really need to move out of home, and I really need to, if not own a house, then rent a house. And I think the global economy doesn't look great in the next few years, and I think we are about to learn as they learn what they do with that trade-off, I think.
Fascinating. Alex?
So I've been running small startups for almost a decade now, and you would think that it would get easier over time, but it certainly feels like it's getting harder. And one of the reasons it's getting harder is because it does feel like there is an accelerating kind of generational change. And one of the things I try and remember is that in this day and age, what does CEO stand for? Sometimes Chief Empathy Officer is actually what it stands for. And I do think we're moving into a new paradigm of management and leadership where people really need to be different. And, you know, we can put sort of Steve Jobs and people like that on a pedestal. I just don't think Steve Jobs could build Apple today with that leadership style. He would be cancelled before he got anywhere close to building a company of that scale. So you really do need to adapt. And Gen Z, Gen Z, whatever we call them, are very much kind of, I guess, at the kind of the sharp end. I'm sure the generation that follows them will be much more different maybe from they are to the generation that came before them. And search for meaning, huge. We're kind of the beneficiaries of this in some ways because we're both a tech startup and we're a social impact startup. And so we get inundated with applications, which is wonderful. I think we get about 250 applications for every person we make an offer to. I unquestionably wouldn't get a job at the company that I started, which is quite a sobering thought. People, to use Tony's phrase, self-actualization, is like hugely important. People want to be their authentic selves. And again, bring this back to the leadership point, one of the things that people running organizations need to do these days is be vulnerable. You know, I can talk about company strategy, and I could give a fantastic talk on company strategy, but I guarantee you it would not go down as well as me talking about my mental health. You know, and that is what people want to hear. And there are reasons why we can kind of slightly, you know, snigger, but there are reasons why people want to hear about that, because they also want to be in an organization led by empathetic people who understand them and care about them. And in some ways, that is rightly more important than someone who is a strategic mastermind, not that I am. And I think the other thing that we see is political persuasions and how this boundary between work and ideology, if you will, has blurred and been eroded. And this is, again, something that so many companies are having to grapple with. And one of the things that, you know, has made my job harder is there are no longer this sense of this is suitable for work and this is not suitable for work. And so there are a whole new set of expectations and aspirations that need to be managed. But I'll probably end with, like Luciano, a note of optimism, which is that there are many, many big problems in the world to solve. And you know, much as I sympathise with the gentleman over there, with people moving between law firms, I also, as a former lawyer, can say that I am excited about the migration of young people to work on social problems because it is necessary, it is timely, and I think they are, all in all, imperfectly, but nonetheless rising to some really important challenges.
Phenomenal. Just to tie this all together in a candid way, as only the chair of this panel can do, we're seeing increasingly from my world that a lot of our clients who are scaling digital businesses, there's a mantra that is being adopted by both the talent and the clients who are evolving their offering. It's do good and do well. They want you want to work for a business that's got a mission, but it's also cash generative. So you can do good and do it. You have to trade off mission for revenue. And I think that is a sign. Businesses are evolving what matters to them. When they talk about their goals, it's not revenue. It's like climate, clients, couriers, culture. And it's retention tool, but also I think they really believe it. Speaking of doing good and doing well, I think we can all agree that our panel have done incredibly well, and we should give them a massive round of applause. I'm sure, like me, you get to go to many of these events, but this is by any standards, a world-class panel of exceptional qualified speakers who just are also brilliant orators. So thank you all very much for doing this. And also, in a very candid segue, Resource clearly does good. I think we can know that from the numbers and all the fact you're all here, but they're also doing very, very well to get to this landmark birthday. And so there's a short video, which is going to be shown on the screen now, of how good and how well they've actually done. So enjoy the video. I hadn't allowed for the time of this dropping. And enjoy the video.
So thank you all so much. It's my absolute pleasure. I'm Victoria Sturmer, the Chief Executive of Resource. My absolute pleasure to thank the panel. I'm sorry the Minister couldn't be here, but I think you'll all agree that we didn't need her tonight. So thank you each and every one of you, and also to Stephen for chairing so admirably. We had a few gifts that are on their way. Sorry, we just wanted to thank you all in front of us. So whilst Lynn gives you gifts, I just wanted to say I'm just so proud of everything we've achieved at Resource over these 30 years, brimming with pride and the professionalism that everyone's done this work. I hope you see how important our work is. Sadly, it doesn't come without cost at all, and so it is an opportunity tonight to say to you that if you would like to help us in our work and support our work, then we would really love it if you'd like to make a donation. We have a QR code that is going to be on screen now, I think. No, okay, it's going to come in a second. We have Emily and Sam, would you make yourself known? Who have contactless card readers, so just a little tap is all that it takes. We have ambitious plans for the next 30 years, or at least the next few years. So we're going to help many more people with your help. It takes help from all you wonderful volunteers, friends, supporters, and donors. So with your help, we will be helping many, many more people. Watch this space. Our plans will all be announced soon. So lastly, just really to thank you all again. So if you'd like to give out our gifts, so thank you to Luciana, to Tony, to Alex, and to Stephen for all your help with the event. And thank you to all of you for coming. Thank you for everything that you've done for Resource over these 30 years. You all do so much. You are wonderful. You're amazing. And I'm very, very proud to be your CEO. So thank you very much. Wishing you all a really, really pleasant journey home. And we'll all be watching the news tonight, I think. So thank you very much.